November 10th, 2025. Just picture it. A typical Monday evening in New Delhi. The city's alive, The usual rush of traffic, people heading home. But in a single, terrible flash, an ordinary day is completely shattered by an act of terror, right in the heart of the nation, near one of India's most iconic landmarks.
And this was the scene. It was around 7 p.m. when a car bomb just ripped through one of the city's busiest areas. We're talking absolute chaos. This wasn't some quiet street. This was the heart of Old Delhi, a place that's always packed with locals, with tourists, right next to the historic Red Fort.
And this was the devastating result. 13 people lost their lives in that explosion. Dozens and dozens more were left with serious injuries. It's a number that really drives home the very real, very human cost of these conflicts.
So, in the aftermath, the first focus, of course, was on saving lives. But very quickly, the questions started piling up. How could this have happened? Who was behind it? And that's when the investigation began, trying to connect the dots and uncovering a story that went way beyond this one tragic event.
The initial findings were, they were pretty startling. The car itself was just a standard Hyundai i20, but the bomber, anything but typical. It was a university assistant professor, a Dr. Umar Nabi. The explosive used, TATP, is notoriously volatile. They actually call it the mother of Satan. And the suspected group behind it all, Jaish-e-Mohammed, a very familiar name in the region's long and troubled history. The case, as you'd expect, was immediately taken up under India's strict anti-terror law, the UAPA.
The bomber's profile really forced a difficult conversation about this chilling new trend, white-collar terrorism. It just shatters that old stereotype of what a terrorist looks like. We're talking about highly educated professionals, people with good careers, who are being radicalized, a lot of the time online, and then carrying out these horrific attacks. It's a development that security agencies are really scrambling to get their heads around.
But here's the thing. This bombing, it didn't just happen in a vacuum. It was a reaction. And to really understand why a professor would drive a car loaded with explosives into a crowded street, we need to rewind the clock a few months to a huge military operation that basically rewrote the rules of engagement in the region.
And that brings us to Operation Sindoor. Now, this wasn't just another border skirmish. This was a defining moment. It was a massive, coordinated campaign that set a brand new and very aggressive precedent.
So here's how it all went down. It started back in April with a really brutal terror attack in Pahalgam, Kashmir that killed 26 civilians. Just about 2 weeks later, India responded with Operation Sindoor, a major punitive campaign hitting terror infrastructure. The whole situation escalated incredibly fast, leading to Indian strikes on actual Pakistani military bases before a pretty fragile ceasefire was put in place just 3 days later.
India's strategy this time around was this really powerful mix of military and non-military actions. On the military side, they launched these precise airstrikes, took out key terror commanders, and even hit 11 Pakistani air bases in one go. But their non-military moves might have been just as impactful. They suspended a critical water-sharing treaty, shut down trade routes, and went on a global diplomatic offensive to isolate Pakistan.
And this quote from Prime Minister Modi, "Blood and water cannot flow together," it just perfectly captured the mood. Suspending the 1960 Indus Waters Treaty was a monumental decision. It basically turned a decades-old agreement about resources into a powerful weapon of statecraft. The message was loud and clear.
So that raises a pretty big question. How did India pull off such a complex, multi-domain operation so effectively? Well, the answer isn't in some new piece of hardware. It's in years of quiet, deliberate reforms that were all aimed at transforming its armed forces into a single, cohesive fighting unit. This transformation definitely didn't happen overnight. It started way back in 2019 with the creation of the Chief of Defense Staff. Then came a new Department of Military Affairs to really push for jointness. They built integrated logistics hubs. They passed new laws giving unified authority to tri-service commanders. So Operation Sindoor wasn't some sudden move. It was really the culmination of this 5-year push for a truly unified military.
All right, so this new era of conflict abroad has had some pretty profound consequences back home. Let's bring our focus back to Delhi, where the threat of attacks like the one at the Red Fort has literally transformed the city and the whole idea of public safety.
The threat of terror has absolutely fueled a massive security boom. The market for things like automated barriers, high-tech surveillance, bollards, it was already at $440 million in 2025, and it's projected to just skyrocket from there. Our cities are basically becoming fortresses, with physical security becoming a very visible, everyday part of life.
But here's a really disturbing paradox. While Delhi is beefing up its defenses against terror, other crimes are soaring. Get this. Despite all that increased surveillance, crimes against women in the city jumped by over 40% in just 1 year. It really makes you wonder, does more security tech actually make us safer, or does it just change what we're afraid of?
And that brings us right to the core of the dilemma. As experts from the Edgelands Institute pointed out, there's a really delicate balance that has to be struck. How does a society ramp up security against legitimate threats without eroding the very freedoms and privacy it's trying to protect in the first place?
So where does this all leave us? The events of 2025 haven't really brought any resolution. Instead, what they've created is a new, much more volatile and much more dangerous reality in one of the world's most sensitive regions.
So this is the new reality. We're in a cycle of attack and massive retaliation. The line between terrorists and the states that sponsor them, it's basically gone. Strategic resources like water are now being used as weapons. Domestic security is becoming totally pervasive. And all of this, taken together, dramatically increases the risk of a deadly miscalculation between two nuclear powers.
It leaves us with one final and pretty unsettling question. As the old rules of engagement get thrown out the window and this new, more aggressive playbook takes hold, we really have to ask ourselves, in this new era of conflict, what is the true price of peace?